What is up, and welcome back to 24 Minutes of A24, the podcast that takes a look at the A24 library 24 minutes at a time. I'm Ethan Simi.
And I'm Ben Lawhorn. This week on the pod, we are paying homage to one of our favorite A24 films, a true horror staple from Maestro Ari Aster, Midsommar. My cool shirt.
Look at that shirt. Oh, that's a glorious shirt. Big spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie. We're 1 minute in. We spoiled it for you.
Spoiled it.
A couple travels to Northern Europe to visit a rural hometown's fabled Swedish Midsummer Festival. What begins as an idyllic retreat quickly devolves into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of a pagan cult. Spoilers are ahead, obviously, for Midsommar. This movie came out 4 years ago, so if you haven't seen it yet, I'm sorry, but you should probably watch it. A lot of you are probably asking, hey, you already covered Midsommar back in your 6th episode a year and a half ago. Can you believe that, Ben? And we're here to say, yeah, we did, but Midsommar fucking rocks. And also, we have a very exciting conversation with the composer of Midsommar and Beau is Afraid and Beef after our conversation right now. So stick around, stay tuned for that with Bobby Krlic, aka the Haxan Cloak is what he goes by. Nice. Which, by the way, Ben, did you know that the Haxan Cloak stands for, or is like some type of Swedish lingo for the witch? I couldn't believe that when I learned.
Really?
Oh yeah. Dang. Check the wiki, dude. Check the wiki.
I like it. That's good.
Wild stuff. Ben, you unfortunately missed out on the interview, the conversation with Bobby Krlic, and I'm really sorry, man, because it was a really fun conversation, and obviously I hope people stick around and listen to it. He talks about Midsommar a lot and his influences for the score, and you know how a daylight horror movie kind of changes things when it comes to that. And I gave you a shout out. I just wanted to let you know. I was like, Ben's got it. He couldn't be here, you know.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I was bummed to have missed that, but I'm excited to listen to it. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you give us the really quick down low on Tokyo? How was it on Japan? Because you were gone, and you know a lot of people cried, including myself. And but you're back, so I'm glad.
I'm back. I'm on American soil. Japan was cool. We did a cruise around the country. We actually did one stop in South Korea in Busan, which is where I got to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in legit IMAX. I haven't seen a legit IMAX movie in a while, so that was awesome. Nothing like crying in a foreign country. But yeah, it was an awesome trip. It was cool to see a bunch of stuff. Obviously I missed a couple episodes here. I'm glad Alden came on. And yeah, I'm excited to hear this interview. So Japan was cool, but I'm glad to be back and talking about, you know, spoiler alert, one of my favorite movies ever. Absolutely.
Yeah. Glad to have you back. Okay. Let's talk about Midsommar. We're going to kind of do a shortened, a truncated episode here. We're going to go about it a little bit differently. We're not going to go do tons of true cinema. We're not going to do tons of A1 acts. We're just kind of going to talk about Midsommar as a whole. I rewatched it for the first time since our very first episode. So this is only the second time I've seen this movie. I immediately texted you. I texted you when I started it, and I was like, holy shit, I'm 15 minutes in or 12 minutes in, and this movie is unbelievably good.
Yeah.
And then I finished it and I texted you and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a perfect movie. I'm pretty positive that's as good as it gets for horror. Like I was stunned.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about the movie. I love this, like rewatching it again. It was just, I've talked about it on here and it's kind of weird, but it is like a strange comfort movie for me. Like I really do.
You're sick. What are you? Are you a fucking sicko?
Are you a sicko?
We did it.
Logan, we did
3
it.
in a row.
We did it. Yeah, I don't know. I really love this movie. I love what Ari Aster did. I do think also that's why like it definitely influenced my feelings on Beau, because I was just like, give me my next favorite movie ever, you know, which was like a wrong way to go into it.
Pretty high bar, to be honest.
It's a high bar, and not many people are ever going to achieve that. So, yeah, it was a really good rewatch. I also, you know, after you text me, I was like, oh yeah, it just really dialed in on the first 20 minutes. I'm like, it is pretty intense. Like it's so good. This is like the most gaslighty boyfriend I think we've ever seen
Oh
on
my
film.
God, the worst.
Like he's awful.
Christian.
Yeah, Christian. But so many great lines in this movie I love. Like, do you feel held, Danny? Like, there's just so much good stuff in here. But you were spot on. It's like, oh, this first 20 minutes is like, it's a great way to set up a movie.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the score very briefly. You'll hear more in our conversation with Bobby Krlic, but basically he mentioned, he used a lot of old Disney animated films as like a kind of a template for what Midsommar was. And going back and watching this movie with a more keen ear to the score, it is majestic. It is enlightening. It has a levity to it. It is a floating score that is quite frankly like ethereal and otherworldly. Like it is so good. And I guess I just like I didn't catch on to that the first time, right? Like I've watched so many movies in the year and a half since I've seen Midsommar and like view movies so differently now. Having this type of a score, it's so unsettling, but it's also so romantic for like what is going on. And so it really kind of crosses this ground of like, wow, I want to be here. This is angelic. Like this feels good. It feels bright. It feels lofty. But then like, they're like putting pubes and blood into juice. So like, I don't know.
It's so cool. I mean, that's one of the things I love the most by this movie is the score and just like the shift on the traditional horror of like doing it during the day. Love it. Like in both those things together, I think is what just like makes this work so well for me. The score is something I've come to appreciate the more I watch movies, like going to school for film and just like learning about it. Like it's crazy. Like they just like, it comes from nowhere. There's kind of like seeing what's happening. It's like, I was blown away when we talked to Disaster Piece about like doing Marcel and stuff. And it's like, how'd you come up with this? Like, I don't know. Just
and
like,
Bodies, right? Yeah. Like didn't he had two very distinct projects like back to back.
Yeah. And I just think it's one of the things that just impresses me the most is how these people are able to find this tone for a movie or, for a piece. Like I used to work with a dude, his name's Mike Bishop. I know he's done scores for movies and stuff. And I used to watch him work. It's like, it blows my mind. Like I do editing and stuff. So I get all that, but to just come up with something, it's like, it's crazy. And the score on this, again, like knowing what you guys talked about and really paying attention to that on this rewatch, like this is amazing. This movie doesn't work half as well without this score being exactly what it is. Like he did Ari Aster deserves so much credit for all this kind of stuff, but also in hiring the right person to make this score. That's a huge part of it. And what Bobby Krlic did, like it's beautiful.
Yeah. The camera work, I really, really honed in this time. Dude. It is scrumptious, dude. It is just mouth watering how fluid and finessed each camera movement is. We get so many incredible, really unique, really interesting, fun, like edits, like Danny walking into the bathroom and we get this great overhead shot and then it comes down when the door closes and she's in the airplane bathroom. Yeah. And like moments like that. And especially like I wrote down, the car kind of, we get that big, long sweeping car shot where we go overhead and we flip and we get this really inverted sense of like, okay, we're entering an inverted reality, right? A very visual storytelling mechanic, but also exceptionally fun to watch. It is so, and I guess part of the reason I was like, I'm like so enamored by this is the movie's like 2 hours and 24 minutes. It's like, it's long. It is not a short movie. And when I went to go fire it up, I was like, fuck, like a 2.5 hour movie? I guess I didn't know what I was signing up for. And the camera work makes it so enjoyable to watch. It's so mesmerizing. It
really is. Like the car one is probably my favorite shot of the whole movie, just because I love how long we stick with it and just like slowly turn under, just watch it going through. I love that shot. I also really, the one that stuck out to me this time is we hear Will Poulter, like we see them on screen, I think like sitting at the table and stuff like that. It's like this nice wide shot. And then we hear Will Poulter say like, those girls are walking weird. And then like the camera just suddenly like pans down and it's the girls like walking backwards and like picking the flowers. I'm like, that's so cool. Cause like you could have just cut to that, but instead it's like, we're going to show the whole motion of the camera dropping down and showing you like the girls walking like this. So I loved that. I forget almost every time, like there's definitely plenty of gore and graphic stuff in it.
Yeah.
But the thing I always forget about is the initial like kind of sacrifices of the old people jumping. Yep. They're actually not like gnarly shots like of them doing the jump. You know what I mean? It's like they're pretty wide shots. The guy jumps and we stay back. Like we're like hundreds of feet back and just watch him fall. And it's like, oh, this is like a one shot of just this dude jumping. It's not that intense. Then obviously we cut to him like moaning on the ground with an eye bulged out and his leg just completely fucked, you know,
oh my God.
Or the shots of like both their faces as they're being like put over the fire. Like
fucked to death.
We see plenty of super gnarly shit. Like the dude flayed out in the room. Like we see plenty of it. But I just think it was so interesting to me again, just to be like, man, what a choice to be like, I'm going to show you something really intense, but I'm going to show it to you from like 500 feet away, you know, and then we'll cut to it. So yeah, the camera work is great.
Which I think is part of the genius, because that very scene that you mention, that does not happen for like about an hour, about 50 or 55 minutes until we are in the movie. We get to that moment, and that's the first big shock factor that we're seeing happen to our group of, you know, Danny and Christian and everybody, and ourselves, the audience, and keeping that refrain and keeping that distance to pique that interest, I think is so smart from Ari Aster to say like, what, like, did I just see what I think I saw? And it's this really questionable moment of like, is this really happening for a reason? And then as the movie progresses, we continually hone in more and more and more, and the frame becomes tighter on everything that we see, leading into, you know, seeing this guy flayed wide open in a chicken coop, and we are essentially so tight on his body that's been ripped apart and strung that it is overhanging the frame or the edges of the shot.
Yes,
and I think that is such a smart decision. You mentioned Christian just probably the worst boyfriend on screen. Like, can we just like call that now? He's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's listening has the worst one, please let us know. But like, Christian's got to be on this like Mount Rushmore of like horrible film boyfriends. Like he sucks so bad. Like, I don't know, like her, you know, family just dies. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go to a party for like 45 minutes. You know, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? He is the absolute worst. Like forgetting her birthday. He's like, oh, I just thought it was yesterday with the time change and all. Like, he sucks. He's such a gaslighty dude. Stealing Josh's like thesis. He's like, you know, I thought maybe I'll do that too. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me, man? Like, not even just a boyfriend. He's a shitty friend. You know, it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
He's a bad person.
Yeah, and then like William Jackson Harper, who's awesome in this. You know, people probably know him from The Good Place, but like just him, it's like, no, you are an asshole. You can't like just do. He's like, well, I'm gonna do it on this one specifically. Like, you're gonna travel around more, but I'm just gonna do these guys. It's like, you're just taking my idea. Like, this sucks. And Christian, played by Jack Rayner, who's like a wonderful actor. If you haven't seen Sing Street, please.
Yeah, what's Jack Rayner been up to these days, huh?
Just go watch Sing Street. That's all you need to watch. I
still haven't seen it.
Dude, add that to the list, man. Your list is just like
it's so deep, dude.
Up. Yeah.
It's so deep. Looks like he was in Cherry recently, the Tom Holland Apple TV Plus failed Russo brothers film. So
I would say, yeah, we know the Russos can't do anything outside of Marvel. Yeah. Yeah, he's awesome. So yeah, go check out Sing Street. He plays a really cool older brother in that, but the opposite of Christian.
Nice. But, good to know.
Really good cast. Like, I love Pele. Obviously Will Poulter plays Mark. These guys all just have these different levels of like shittiness, you know, where they all kind of get what's coming.
I want to give a shout out to Will Poulter because he is excellent in this movie. And like, there's one scene in particular when they're kind of in the house and this chick kind of comes in, one of the Swedish chicks, and says something, I can't remember, and like walks out and makes eye contact with him. And he turns to either Josh or Christian or whatever. And he's like, dude, you just saw that, right? Like, that just happened. Yeah. And I'm just like, dude, you got to chill. Like, that she like told you to come to dinner or something. Like, bring it back.
Like, I mean, just because it stuck in my head when I heard it, I was like, God, like you've been there for like an hour, dude. But he turns to Paley. He said, I want to give her a bath. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, dude, like
so
pump the
funny.
fucking brakes, man. Like you haven't even unpacked yet. You can't be talking like
Dude.
this. Like this is insane. Like
And the whole bit about ticks too, how Josh's grandfather or whatever died from, or I guess it was his own grandfather, got Lyme, and he's like, he's fucked. Let me tell you, it was not worth the picnic in the park.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like the passing comment later on. It's like, hey, check my junk for ticks and I'll check yours. You know, it's just like, all right, dude.
I think that's a great like segue into understanding, Ari Aster's talked about this movie, and he's talked about a lot of his movies as well, especially with Beau is Afraid, as being, a prevalent comedy, as definitely being this kind of satire on a bad relationship or a bad trip overseas or like whatever it may be. This movie is hilarious. And so I want to know from you, the orgy scene, very pivotal scene in this movie, very creepy, disgusting, strange scene that is happening. Really almost indescribable. Like when it comes to a podcast, like you just got to tell someone to watch it, right?
Yeah.
Is it more frightening or is it more funny to you?
I mean, frightening. Like it's a nightmare. Like I don't even like peeing next to someone at a urinal. I cannot imagine.
You don't
want
a 65-year-old woman pushing ass into somebody.
That's like the thing that gets me every time I watch it, is like, how is he staying hard right now? This is crazy. Like the amount of tunnel vision you have to have just to like be focused on it. Like that's absurd. So
he's like fucked up on whatever kind of, he drank something. So he goes in like on a trip, and then he inhales some type of smoke for his vitality. Yeah. So it's like, dude is like all sorts of messed up.
Like he just like can't get, I don't know.
I thought it was frightening. And then I kind of remembered like, okay, Ari Aster is funny. Like he gets it. He's kind of in on the joke. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of funny because like it is so absurd. It is so awfully absurd what we're watching that you kind of can't help, like when that woman starts to push on him to thrust into Maya, and Maya like looks at him and is like, finish. Then I'm just like, oh, like this is so fucked. Like this is just ridiculous, So I think that is, kind of worth mentioning and really brings us to, the ultimate demise of the movie. The dancing competition, another very pivotal scene in this movie, when the May Queen is crowned and Danny becomes that queen. She takes whatever beverage is handed to her, which is, a type of an elixir with special properties, essentially. I want to know how long you would last. Are you a longevity dancer here? Could you hang with the best of them, Ben?
No, not at all.
Just a hard no.
No. I think I mentioned on here before, I was in a band, and I very intentionally in my life have chosen to play the drums, because while I do feel like I have some rhythm, I just want to sit down. Like I do not want to be like dancing or in front of people. Like I need stuff in front of me. So I would totally have just like tapped out. It's like, cool, you guys are doing great. I'm gonna sit over here and drink whatever tea I'm being handed right now. But like, there's no way. Would you have one? Would you be the next May Queen?
No, I'm out in the first round for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
I could try to hang, but I'm going to be pretty frank with you. Like I've never escalated my intake to levels of like trip. Like I've never tripped. Yeah. I've never done any of like that. What it seems is happening pretty frequently here in Harga. So I think I'd just be down. Like I would ingest that and I'd just be fucked, like pretty much from the start.
Honestly, like kind of relaxing, because like that is one of the best things I think about this movie that people talk about too, is like the trip they're on at the beginning, like the way things just kind of like pulsing and whatever. I'm like, this is the closest thing I've seen to being realistic, and it's really well done.
And when Christian kind of goes on his trip, right, and he like sits at the table that, we've already had of our May Queen, he sits at the table and kind of asks this older guy, like, what is happening? And the guy slaps his face. Basically, from that moment on, anytime we're moving anywhere, anytime we're changing scenery, if you look in the foreground or the background close enough, everything is kind of in flux. It's in wiggles. It's in this very distinct visual style that Ari Aster has like stamped on this movie that I think is incredibly frightening because that's exactly what they're going through.
Yeah.
I did want to call out one thing quick for the orgy scene with Christian. Another notch on his like I'm a terrible person leaderboard is in the very beginning of the movie when all of him and his buddies are eating pizza and sitting around. Will Poulter mentions like, dude, you could just break up and find a girl that actually likes to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
My dude is just is getting pent up. You know, he's just trying to drain the dragon here, and he wants it that bad that he's good. He's like game with some weird fucking Swedish crazy spiritual thing. I don't see myself ever getting to that point.
I mean, also like his partner's family just died. Like, just like think with your other head for a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it is absurd. I think it just again like reiterates how awful he is. Like he is the worst. The worst of John Ralphio. The worst.
the worst. Okay. Those are the couple of scenes I wanted to call out. I also want to talk about the final May Queen decision, where Danny chooses the 9th person to be sacrificed, right? It kind of comes full circle. We realize after 2 hours that, you know, the 2 elders being sacrificed was the beginning of this kind of Harga life cycle that they do every year, essentially, where they take 9 people, they recycle their names for newborns, and, you know, kind of let them live on in that nature. Christian is fucked up like enough to where they purposely paralyze him. Is that like, I think that's like my one question of the movie, which I think is an incredible editing technique from Ari and his crew to have that like eyelid camera, which is so sublime. Does they do this on purpose, or like how does he find himself paralyzed enough to be in the wheelchair?
I mean, it's a wonderful question. I don't know.
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I don't know that I remember exactly either. If it was just like he served his purpose with the girl, and so like they don't need him anymore kind of thing. That's like what I think it is. But yeah, no, that whole sequence is amazing. That's another thing though. Like I maybe need to do more research on it. It's just I've never really bothered to look into it, but there's this like they do it every year, but also when they're there, it's like this one happens every 90 years or whatever, like the one that they're experiencing that year. I'm curious, like are you really sacrificing people every year, or did this just happen to be the 90th year when they make these moves? Cause it's like, every 18 years stuff happens, right? Like that's like with the sleeping, remember like all the different places, like it's on an 18-year cycle. Yep. And then like what happens when you're 72? And then like, so obviously 18 years on to that is 90. So like, is that when people get sacked? I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
I'm curious about it, but also like it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the movie. And like, I don't care. Kill people each year.
You're not going to write a thesis on Midsommar and Horror.
Maybe that's what it'll be. I'm going to start it, and then you're going to be like, you know what? I'm actually also going to write a thesis on it.
I also care about this movie that much.
That's also what I'm going to do. But no, I am like kind of curious about that, because obviously they have the May Queen every year, because Danny asks about like, oh, who are these people? But yeah, as far as the sacrifice and stuff, I'm curious. So if anybody knows that's listening, please inform me so I don't have to do the work. I would love to hear
just tell
what
me.
the answer is. But I think it's a great scene. And
I admire this movie so much, and this is something that I like in other films as well, that I think a lot of blockbuster big IP films definitely do not subscribe to, but something like an Ari Aster or like somebody else of that vein understands the power of, is letting the imagination do some of the work. So when Danny, as the May Queen, is given this choice, we don't see how she decides. We don't see what she says. We don't see how she communicates it. We don't know her emotional state at that moment. We truthfully, we don't even know if choosing Christian was a hard decision for her. We don't know if she did cry or how she felt about that. But in the end, what we do know is the fact that she did choose Christian when she could have chosen someone she has no relationship with, no idea who they are, complete random person of this, Swedish community. And then we get this, descent into the bear suit, which is incredible, frightening, also funny, that the dad is using this as a teaching moment for his son of like, here's what you do to gut the intestines of the bear.
Yeah.
and this guy is fucking paralyzed right behind you, and you all know he's gonna go in the bear suit.
Yeah, it's so good. Like, we don't see the decision, but honestly, it's like if you're a partner of 4 years, still has to be reminded when it's your birthday. It's like, yeah, go ahead and sacrifice him. Like she takes that on.
Take
like,
him
no,
out.
it's my fault. I didn't remind him. It's like, it's your birthday. You guys have been together for 4 years, which he also didn't remember. Like, this is totally fine. He's the worst person in this field, so go ahead and like burn him alive. That is
That's
cool.
a pretty harsh punishment, dude. That's like
you forget my
punishment fits the
birthday.
crime.
Don't fucking forget my birthday. That's the message here, okay? Don't forget my birthday.
Okay, thank God. I just remembered I'm off the hook for another year.
I don't know. Like it's intense, but it's like you said, it was so cool. Just like see him sitting in that chair, just like you see the panic on his face, like he can't do anything. Like and that again, speaking of camera work, like going inside that like cabin, triangle, whatever thing, and just going from person to person and seeing them all in that shot. Like it's such a wonderful shot.
There's something at the very end that I wanted to get your take on. So there's a moment when they are putting in the additional people from the community that they've chosen to sacrifice, right? They've already sacrificed the 4 non-community members in Mark and Josh and the Sophie and whoever the boy's name is. I can't recall. They've all already been killed. Like they've already been, part of the sacrifice. They've got 2 of the elders. They've got 2 new people that have volunteered and then Christian. So the 2 new people that volunteered sit in there. One of them is Pele's brother, which I find fascinating with how devoted he is to this community. And he's fairly young. So I find that very intriguing that he made that decision. Someone comes in and basically says like, take from the yew tree to feel no pain. And like it, gives them some kind of supplement for their mouth, and then goes to Pele's brother and says a similar thing of like, take from the yew tree to feel no fear. And I was most interested in this because those very particular choice of words, feel no pain, that very same person is the only person that we see screaming in pain due to the fire that is consuming his body. And I took that as kind of a narrative twist of like, hey, this community actually just fucked up. Like they just like the shit that they do it's not like rooted. Sure, it might be rooted in like a cultural thing, but like they've convinced themselves like this paste from this tree, it works magic, and it probably just doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, did you have a similar idea to that? Because I just took that as like, oh, it's all in shambles. Cool. This was all for nothing,
I mean, in theory, they've had 0 people give them feedback on it, right? Like no one's like, actually, you're right. There was no pain when I burned alive.
Hey,
so
can you stop the fire for a second? I just give you some feedback like, on this medicine.
Where are you at on the pain level? Like showing them some chart with like a sad face and a happy face, like 1 to 10. Where are you at on here? I don't think they're doing that. So it's just like, that's a thing that you can just say. It's just like, oh, this will take away all your pain. Don't worry. There's like cynical, skeptical sides of religion that obviously kind of get unfolded in here as well, of just like, faith versus reality, whatever. I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff, but that does go into it. It's just like, just take our word for it that this is what it is. Like, okay, cool. And then find out too late, like, oh no, that wasn't a thing at all. So I think that's a really interesting observation, but it's like, I guess they haven't had anyone come back to them and be like, yeah, you guys were right. This was perfect.
It was, it's just a hint of the deep pharmaceutical hole that Ari Aster would enter with Beau's Afraid. He was just getting warmed up with the pharmaceuticals. Okay, I know we didn't do true cinema in a original or standard fashion here, but we're gonna do one A1 act. We're gonna rank, and then we're gonna get out of here to the conversation with Bobby Krlic. Is there any particular scene that you want to note as your favorite? Because episode 6 was like 83 or 89 episodes ago or something crazy. So I'm sure it was different then to what it might be now.
One thing, I mean, speaking of Beau, I talked about it in that review. One of my favorite things about this movie is seeing that like chart at the beginning that lays out the whole movie.
Genius.
Like from the beginning, from the parents, being killed just all the way to the end. And the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, he's just showing us everything that's going to happen. That's kind of cool.
It's such a boss move too.
It really
is. He's like, here's the whole movie. And it's like, oh, cool, dude. You got like massive balls.
Yeah, and then we kind of saw a little bit of that in Beau, when they do like the fast forward recordings, like, oh, so he's going to end up here, and then he's going to end up here, and like
and
just
the
little
boat?
snippets. But like we saw that all that happened in the movie, and I remember talking about that in that episode. I was like, oh, it kind of goes back to his like Midsommar, like here's what's going to happen. I think that shot just takes so much guts and so much like trust and faith in your own ability. So that's got to be my A1 act, because like, when you can tell someone what the whole movie is, but they're still hooked for the next like 2 hours and 20 minutes, like that's a baller move. That's fantastic.
It is. And I wrote that in my Letterboxd review as well. It's like that's kind of genius, to be honest. Like you are that confident in your story and your visuals and your style that everybody has it, and they're still gonna hang around. I mean, there's the very emblematic scene of Mark or Will Poulter's character basically saying like, nobody's going to talk about the bear in the cage, and Pele is just like, no, it's just a bear in a cage, and they just like walk by, and that moment is just like, what the fuck, and then like comes around, right, and like we totally get it, and there's so many of those visual indicators throughout the movie. I think mine was the same as last time as what it's going to be now, but it is really, and I firmly and truly hold this of like the most impactful, probably best of the genre, final 15 seconds of a movie within this world, of seeing Florence Pugh as Danny watch that fire happen and watch all of these people groan and moan and belabor in their customs and their pain and what they do, for her to then smile, to change from frightful and fearful to feeling held, to feeling like she's part of a community. She is the queen. She made this decision, and she ultimately feels let go of Christian, right? And that's like what it took for her to get out of this relationship, was to sacrifice him in a bear pelt. So, I think it's really fucked up on a lot of levels, and I think there's a lot to look out there. What that means for Danny and like her relationship to her current trauma with her sister and her parents, I think that's a little less clear and a little less concise, but I think that's part of it. I think that's what makes it so intriguing to me. I love that imagination factor at the very end. Okay, A1 acts, I just wanted to go with A24 Horror. I just wanted to keep it solid because this is without a doubt among the best. I mean, you talk about A24, this is tip of the tongue for a lot of people. So here's what I've got on the short list here. X Pearl, It Comes at Night, Hereditary, another Ari Aster film, High Life, Men. You remember that movie? That was crazy.
I remember the ending of that movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, you want to talk about endings? Holy shit. Under the Skin, Lamb. Another weird ending movie here. Tusk, a great ending to that movie. In Fabric, Climax, Enemy, Saint Maud. Wow, Saint Maud. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was crazy, dude.
I mean, talk about last 5 seconds, Enemy. Come on.
That's wild.
They know what they're doing.
Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Green Room, The Blackcoat's Daughter, Beau is Afraid, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, The Lighthouse, and your all-time personal fave, The Witch. A24 Horror, I feel like it's a little unfair to be like, pick the A1 act. You want to do you want to do your top 3 or top 5 or something, or how do you want to structure this? I'm totally open for whatever.
Well, I mean, we are talking about my number one all time, A plus. Like I love Midsommar so much. I did finally see Pearl. It's fantastic. I love it.
Love it.
I am just going to take this minute. What I am going to do is I'm going to shout out Green Room, because I'm going to do that any chance I get.
Yep. Watch
Green Room. It's probably like my favorite as far as like, I don't know. I love that one so much. Yeah, that's just all. I just want to talk about Green Room. Green Room's great. Please go watch it. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah.
I need to watch Green Room again, because I feel like there's a rift between us, because like I didn't enjoy Green Room on the level that you did. And so I'm like, fine. And like, I've been holding back because I don't want to say her name because I don't want her to feel bad. Like, I love Jade so much. And I think that's like, I respect her opinion so much that when she didn't love it, I was like sad. I was like, oh no, like I wanted her to love it so much. And it's fine that she didn't. Jade, I love you so much. I hope you'll come back on soon. But when she was like, it wasn't for me. I'm like, oh fuck, man. Like, I love that movie. Am I wrong? I might be wrong, because Jade's like smart about everything. But yeah, I want everyone to watch Green Room.
and make their own opinions on it. You don't have
Yeah.
to love it, but I just think if you could see Patrick Stewart as like a skinhead Nazi leader, dude, like,
Yeah,
why
pretty sick.
wouldn't you do that? Like, yeah. So that's what I'm going to shout out.
Yeah, I can't argue that. That's a good call for there. Look, I think when it comes to horror within A24, I think there's definitely like multiple tiers here. I mean, you're definitely talking about Midsommar and Hereditary filling that S tier, that very, very top cream of the crop situation. I do want to talk about Climax. I don't think I've ever been more uncomfortable during a film than I've watched Climax. The movie's fucked up like on a whole different level, and I like even thinking about it, I just like kind of get the crawlies, and I just don't like. Whoa, Gaspar Noé, good guy.
A gift that like focuses on dancing in film, and I went to the Climax page because they have like a section on it.
Yeah, was that in there?
Even just looking at the photos, like, oh god, this movie is so uncomfortable. Like, I genuinely don't know if I'd rather watch that or Hereditary, because both of those, like, they're great, but it's like, oh, I don't know what would be a worse rewatch. Like, they both fuck with me so much.
They do. I just can't. Anytime I think about Climax, I cannot get over the fact that like, let me lock my kid in an electrical closet to be safe. I just can't deal with that. I do think, you know, A24 is so unique in their horror, and that's what I personally really feel like they kind of made their name with, that they really paid their way with these movies. I think High Life is definitely underrated when it comes to A24 horror. Like, that is some really, really crazy stuff. I mean, if you like, you know, Robert Pattinson, that's got a stellar cast to it, and that is super interesting. I think Enemy is great. Saint Maud, again, another like really good religious movie. And if you're looking for something with like a killer 10 seconds, that'll just fuck you up. Like, it'll just really make you question everything you watched. We obviously talked about Beau is Afraid. I don't really consider Beau is Afraid a horror movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it is.
We're definitely planning on doing a rewatch for Beau is Afraid when it comes out on VOD. So prepare yourselves, because
we're do like a rewatch recap, like a watch along pod.
Dude, I'm all for it. I think Beau deserves. If there is ever a movie that deserves it, I think it's Beau.
It's Beau. Maybe right.
Every time I say Beau is Afraid, I just always think of Nathan Lane saying, "You scared of going home, Beau?" And I just can't not think about that.
My dude.
my dude, my brother. Okay, I think we're both in the same boat. A+24.
Yeah.
I think there's no question about it. Midsommar is fantastic, excellent on all fronts. Next week on the pod, we're getting emotional. We're dialing it back a little bit. We're going the other direction. We are talking about the 2022 film Close from director Lucas Dont. It was nominated at the 2023 Academy Awards for Best International Feature for Belgium. It was a movie that was picked by one of our listeners, Sweet Pea Jess on Twitter. She won one of the Oscar prediction polls that we ran. So we gave her the chance to pick a topic, and she wanted to join us. So she's going to be joining us for that conversation, which is a great conversation, really fun.
Yeah.
Please go into that pod ready to cry, I think.
Yeah, oh man, yeah, a big recommend from us. I think to see Close. It is a gut punch of a movie. At least speaking personally, I cried quite a bit in that. So yeah, look forward to that episode.
It's good.
It's fun to recap Midsommar. We would love to hear what you guys feel about Midsommar. You know, like Ethan said, it's been 83 episodes since we talked about it. So I'm glad to get back to it. So yeah, let us know what you think. Also tell us like what you've done to someone who's forgotten your birthday. Like, what's the worst thing you've done to somebody?
Like, what is the acceptable punishment level of like forgetting a birthday? Is it like, you know, paralyzing them and stitching them into a bare skin and burning them alive? Like,
I think it might be.
Seems accurate to me.
Yeah, I think the bar's been set. So yeah, let us know. You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram. We are at 24 minutes of A24. Also, we are on YouTube where you can see our faces and my super cool shirt.
Highly recommend.
Yeah. Check us out on there. Subscribe and like and all that kind of stuff. I'm Ben Lawhorn.
I am Ethan Simi. Enjoy our conversation with composer Bobby Krlic. Spring break forever, bitches. Bobby, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Huge congrats on both Beef and Beau is Afraid, your two most recent projects for which you have composed the scores to. Both very distinctive and very different projects, to say the least. I want to start out by asking you about Beau is Afraid. Now, this is the second time that you've worked with director Ari Aster. When you're tasked with composing a film like Beau, where do you even begin? Because this movie pretty much has everything in it.
Yeah, it does. It's certainly not something where you look at it and you immediately know what to do.
Yeah.
So it kind of starts. I mean, I got home from a screening of it. And I called Ari and just began a process of discussion. And I always like to start from an emotional standpoint of, what are we supposed to be feeling and how are we supposed to be feeling it. And Ari is really good at articulating himself in that way, and we don't get sort of bogged down in technicality. And so really kind of start from there. Central character, what are we supposed to be feeling? What's the journey? What's the arc? Points A, B, and C, and how do we link them together? I mean, it's not quite as simple as that, but that's kind of where I like to jump off if we can.
Yeah. Now, this is the first time that you've worked with, or I guess the first time that you did work with Ari Aster, as well as A24, was Midsommar. I know my co-host Ben is just gutted to not be here to talk to you today, because Midsommar is one of his all-time favorite movies. You briefly mentioned what it's like working with Ari and kind of how you kind of go that direction with him in creating a score. But can you talk a little bit more to that? What does that creation process look like with Ari, and what is it that kind of keeps you coming back to him, since this is the second time you've worked with him?
It's a really fruitful collaboration. We spend a lot of time together in the same room. He'll come to LA and he'll stay for a week or a couple of weeks at a time. And after breakfast, he'll come here to my house and we'll sit in my studio, and we'll just, sometimes we work to picture, sometimes we don't. And I'll just start kind of, we'll talk about kind of which cues or which kind of themes we want to kind of tackle for the day. And, Beau was really, really fun in the sense that it felt like it could have a bit more of a sort of a broad scope musically than Midsommar did, in terms of, we could sort of expand past the orchestral parts of it and explore other areas. So, a lot of it was me sitting and playing guitar for him and pulling scenes up and finding chord progressions and melodies that worked, or moving to piano or bass, or, bringing up kind of brass sounds and vocals. And there was just a big world to explore. And I think in terms of how I resonate with Ari and what keeps me coming back is there's a great friendship there. I really love him as a human, and we have a lot in common. But I think also I just respect him so much artistically, and I think that he's really saying things that almost nobody in cinema today is saying. And in working with that, it not only gives me great faith in where cinema's going, but it also enables me to say things musically that I don't think I would be able to say in another setting, which is really exciting.
You mentioned Ari comes over to your house and you guys kind of work through this process together. You also mentioned breakfast. Does Ari have a go-to breakfast item that you're aware of?
You know what? I don't know, because we would always meet afterwards. So
keeping the breakfast a secret, I guess. That's part of the ingenious of his creative process.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't want to give the game away.
Speaking of Midsommar, and in relation to Beau is Afraid, and you kind of touched on it, Midsommar is a much more true horror kind of driven genre, but the movie itself kind of breaks away from that core genre by being primarily set in the day. And I know Beau is Afraid encompasses a lot of different, kind of times of the day, so you get to explore that. For Midsommar, did that particular aspect of the film, really being set during the daytime, influence the kind of emotion that went into your creative process, or how you might have written the music as compared to something that takes place at nighttime?
Yeah, definitely. And I think in the sense that, I mean, we talked about Midsommar a lot not really being a quote unquote horror film, but more of being a kind of fairy tale, a
Mm.
very, very, very twisted one. But
Yeah.
uh, so a lot of the things that we were looking at musically with that was the whole film kind of lulls you into this false pretense with it being in the daytime, and you kind of think that nothing can happen because it's bright outside, and not, typically that's not when it's not when you should feel uneasy. So we tried very hard to have a lot of my references for the score was old Disney movies and Alice in Wonderland and works of kind of Nelson Riddle in towards the end of his Capitol days, and Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra arrangements and stuff that felt very kind of classic and dreamy. And I think when you have that, it then if you have the ability to turn that on a dime and then be really terrifying.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. I think that's definitely an anchor in kind of that timelessness and punchy vibe that Midsommar has really kind of taken over within the horror genre and the A24 library.
Yeah.
You've also recently worked with A24 on their Netflix series, Beef, which is just an excellent show all the way around. I know that you've scored several other television series, such as Snowpiercer and The Alienist, along with tons of others. What is the kind of the fundamental or the greatest difference in scoring a television series, which might consist of 10 or 12 episodes, versus a 2 or 3 hour film, and do you prefer one over the other?
I think they both have their own merits. I think a film, at least in my experience of it, a film is something where ideas have to be very specific and very distilled, and you have a very succinct amount of time in which to articulate ideas and to tell a story, and that kind of having to kind of limit oneself in that way and have something that is kind of compressed can be really exciting. Also, the opposite of that can be said for television, where you kind of, if it's a 10 episode series and they're an hour long, you've got 10 hours to say something, and you can sort of rest on themes maybe more than you would in a film, and kind of have things expand slower, and tell the story in a more kind of measured way sometimes, which and it also means that you can delve into your own music a little bit deeper than you might be able to sometimes, and I think both are really exciting for different reasons. Yeah,
I want to kind of elaborate on that just a little bit, because the final episode of Beef really kicks off with a very kind of ethereal score, much different than what you normally do, but kind of ultimately descends, back into your style of darkness of the situation of our characters. When you're scoring a final episode to a show like that, and really kind of trying to land the plane and make a huge impact about the story and all of the wild things, especially with Beef, that we've seen transpire, how do you view that task? Do you kind of treat it like any other episode, or does it come with a little bit of added pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down. It comes down to the showrunner, a lot of the time. But I think, yeah, with generally speaking, yeah, there is a kind of, there's a pressure that I put on myself of that, this sort of has to be the thing that really puts a bow on the whole thing and ties it all together. And I think in terms of Beef, it was actually really exciting because, Sonny, the showrunner, actually was like, this can be a real outlier. It doesn't have to be something musically. He wanted to go somewhere that we hadn't gone musically before through the whole season, because that episode goes somewhere it's incredibly off-piste to where we've previously been. So, that episode was a real gift in terms of I actually didn't quite feel the usual pressure of like, okay, this has to be the kind of the apex of all the themes that we've been building and stuff. And it actually meant that you could just do a total U-turn. And when you've been working on something for 10 episodes, to have that kind of breath of fresh air be brought in at the 11th hour is really liberating.
Now, Beef is kind of a big deal right now. Even as we record, it is still in the top 10 of Netflix. It's kind of taken over the streamer by storm. I'm curious from you, like on a personal standpoint, knowing that you've scored something that is, as successful as Beef and as popular and as kind of embedded in the culture already. Does that mean anything to you? Do you pay attention to that? Does that maybe influence how you might score something in the future or any future projects?
I would it means something to me in the sense of I really believe in the show, and Sonny and the creator and showrunner Sonny and I have a great relationship, and ever since we first met and he told me about the vision for the show, I was so excited, and to see that get received so well, and I'm just really happy for everybody involved, because I do think that like it's a really the messages that are there are really important, and I think it is a very pertinent thing that speaks to now. So I'm really chuffed that it's doing so well. I'm not really one to kind of sit back and take stock of my own work in such ways, and I don't think it will necessarily influence what I'm going to do next or how I approach scoring. But just really happy that it seems to be speaking to people. I think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Do you at all, I know as you kind of score and go through the process, you sometimes, you do it to the video, and I'm sure that you see final cuts along the way. When something like Beef or Beau even comes out, do you attend like an opening weekend situation to kind of get the full picture and see maybe any audience reactions? Or once you're done scoring, is that kind of it for you? Do you kind of distance yourself from the final project?
No, I mean, it's oftentimes, I'll kind of submit my final score, but don't often kind of get to see the full finished package. So I'm all kind of as excited as everybody else, to go to the premiere or screening and see the final thing. And I'd love that. It's like it almost feels like I'm watching it for the first time as well, and Beef is something that my wife and I are watching together currently. Like I'd love watching it, and so I do that. It's awesome.
Now, your music in general and through most of kind of the projects, especially the A24 projects, along with your albums that you've worked on, is really quite dark and textured, very atmospheric. It kind of has a very specific feel and vibe to it, instigates a very dreary kind of energy. Is there something about this darker style of music and scoring that really kind of keeps you coming back to that time and time again as like an underlying theme about what, the music that you create?
I think so. I mean, I think there's aspects of that in Beef. I think Beef has a lot of kind of moments of levity and humor in a way that I've not really been able to express in my work so far, and that's something that I really enjoy leaning into. I mean, I think it's funny. It's one of those things where like sometimes people will say that about my work, that it's dark or it's foreboding, and it's not always something that I am conscious of or that I'm trying to do. I think, I grew up watching a lot of intense movies and listening, I still am an avid fan of metal music and, a lot of kind of dark stuff. And I guess that seeps in somewhere. But I mean, my dad always used to have this interesting saying that his dad always used to say to him, where he was like, one man's medicine is another man's poison. I think that I can kind of find comfort and lightness in potentially dark things that other people might not be able to.
Mm-hmm. Steering away from A24 and this kind of dark and dreadful into something potentially more upbeat here. You are scoring DC's Blue Beetle as your next project. This is going to be the first comic book movie that you've scored. Can you tell me anything about maybe why you chose that project? Have you been wanting to kind of join in on the comic book craze for a while, or did you just see this as a good kind of evolution in the next step of your scoring career?
I've always loved them. Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved, superhero movies and comic book movies, and I was a huge comic book collector when I was younger. And yeah, I just think that it's a really interesting space to be able to make music in. I remember, for instance, being at an IMAX screening of The Dark Knight Rises when that came out. And that whole first sequence with the plane hijacking and stuff and the way that the score works, something just kind of went off in my brain where I'd never heard anything like that in the cinema before. And, I wasn't scoring anything at that point. But it was almost like a mental note that I made to myself where I was like, if I ever get to score movies, like, wouldn't it be cool to be able to do something in that space, in that kind of more commercial space where everybody, a lot of people are going to hear this work. And if you do something that's truly different, you could move a cultural needle in some way, which I find really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I've got to ask from a personal standpoint here. So I'm a big fan of Heat. I'm a big Michael Mann fan. Your Wikipedia says that you were invited by Atticus Ross to help score Michael Mann's 2015 film Black Hat. It doesn't look like you did that. Can you tell us, is there any story that goes along with that to maybe why you didn't go that direction?
Oh, yeah, we did work on that together.
Okay.
But it was more of it wasn't really a sort of, my role was not necessarily, as one of the main kind of composers. I mean, that was the first thing that I'd ever got brought on to do. And I came out to LA to meet Atticus. He'd invited me. We'd never met, and I think he'd heard my music and invited me out to meet him, which was awesome for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, we met, and I went over to his house, and we got on really well. And I hadn't done anything in film at that point, and he was just very complimentary about the work I was doing and asked if I'd ever like to help him out on stuff, for which I obviously said yes. And we swapped details, and he invited me to work on some music for that film, which I did. And I think I don't know, my credit is like programming or something like that. But there was a lot of people that worked on that movie, and like that. There's a few different composers, and Mike Dean was doing stuff, and it was kind of a cacophony of a lot of people contributing in a way that I think only Michael Mann could facilitate.
Right. Heat 2, production's kicking up. Are you trying to get involved with this or what?
Oh, that'd be a dream. You kidding me? It's funny that you should say that, because on my big TV screen in the studio in front of me is, and I'm not kidding you, Heat is up there. I was about to watch it last night.
Incredible play, Bobby. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. I actually have a tattoo that's a juice box, and it just says action on the front of the juice box. There we go.
It's up there for me too. It's like, it's one of those films. It's like it's a sort of rainy day. If you want to just put something on, that's something that I can always watch at any time. It's just so awesome.
Heartily agree. Bobby, before we end the show, I want to put you in a Godfather type situation here for a second. So I'm going to make you choose between your A24 children. Which A24 project out of Midsommar, Beau's Afraid, or Beef is maybe your favorite that you've scored, worked on, or just your favorite project in general?
Oh man, that's brutal. I'm going to upset.
After we had such a personal connection too.
Man, that's really difficult. I mean, I'm going to have to say Midsommar, because that was the first film I'd ever scored on my own, and it really it developed a language of scoring that I'd never had an opportunity to develop, and fostered my wonderful relationship with Ari, who I hold very dear as a friend and a collaborator. And I wouldn't be at the point I am now without being invited to score that film. So that's the one I'm going to go with.
Sorry to put you through the tough decision there, but I'm proud of you for doing it. Bobby, thanks so much for coming on the show. I wish you the best in your future scoring endeavors. And, hopefully, obviously, we see more from you and A24 and Ari Aster, all the like. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.